There is a town, Lansdowne. It's a small town, just 1 square mile. 1 square mile overflowing with tradition, memories, and people going about their daily lives. Each generation adding their stamp, building a community. There is evidence that prehistoric wanderers traveled and lived along the Darby Creek. In the 1600s, Europeans arrived in the area and trapped animals along this waterway. Mills start to come and locate along the Darby Creek in the area that we know as Lansdowne. There were paper mills, there were dye mills along the Darby Creek. In 1855, a single railroad track was laid through present-day Lansdowne. The railroad brings industry and residents. Because there was only a single track, passage through the area is limited to a few trains per day. The local station at the time is known as Darby Road Station. There's much confusion because less than a mile away is the railroad station in the borough of Darby. Richard Griffith, who lives at the railroad track in Wycombe Avenue, purchases furniture in the city and asks that it be delivered to the Darby Road Station, but instead it is delivered to the station in the borough of Darby. He visits Thomas Scott, then an area resident and president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, and asks that the name of the station be changed. Scott settles on the name Lansdowne. The origin of the name is thought to come from Lord Lansdowne's estate in England. At that time, Scott was involved in the centennial celebration in Fairmount Park and would have been familiar with Lansdowne House that was located within the fairgrounds. Scott may have chosen the name only because it was familiar. It's a tradition that's passed down that it's named for Lord Lansdowne's property, but it may not be. The track is only a single track, so as you can imagine, you couldn't have so many trains coming through the town. The town really doesn't start to take off until the 1880s, when the Pennsylvania Railroad buys the line, puts in a second line, and the developers are off. Suddenly, you can take, instead of maybe 5 trips into Philadelphia each day to either get to work or to get to the marketplace, you can take 10 trips or 20 trips. So what happens is speculators start coming in from Philadelphia, as well as other people who live in the general area. In 1893, these groups of developers get together and they decide that for the town to grow, they're going to have to incorporate as a separate borough. So they break off from Upper Darby Township, which was primarily farmers up until World War II. A commuter suburb begins to be built. Developers look to Lansdowne with great promise. The crossroad of Lansdowne and Baltimore Avenues was convenient to the railroad, which took agricultural and manufactured goods to the city's markets. The convenience of the railroad enabled residents to live in the borough and work in Philadelphia. By 1900, the crossroads is bustling with stores, services, and shoppers. The new borough attracts families from Philadelphia who seek a safer and cleaner place to live. The residents took great pride in living in fine homes that reflected their tastes and aspirations. A century later, Lansdowne has over 170 buildings listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and they remain a source of pride throughout the community. Families moving into the community in the 21st century share the same excitement and hope for the future on moving days as did residents in the 20th century. It's unusual that as early as 1900 you have most of the major denominations represented in Lansdowne. Methodists, Roman Catholics, Society of Friends, Presbyterians, Baptists, and Episcopalians. As Lansdowne moves from an agricultural to a residential community, several local landowners promise free land to the first congregation that can raise sufficient funds to construct a church building.